This is Binghamton Now on News Radio 1290 WNBF Binghamton and WNBF.com.
I'm Bob Joseph. You're listening to Binghamton Now for Friday, August 23rd, 2024. It's a local program with a local host. There are no talking points. There is no teleprompter. It's just me and a microphone and a telephone. And we will be taking some phone calls this morning, so don't worry. If you want to talk about the issues, we will talk about the issues. First, though, we hit the ground running with Mayor Jared Cram. Welcome back to the program.
Bob, good morning.
Anything going on?
It's a beautiful day in downtown Binghamton. This is my favorite time of year. A lot of people I know that are teachers or certainly school children are not looking forward to going back to school, but I love this time of year, the weather. I love the fall. It's a great time to live in upstate New York, and I can't get enough of it. I know I may be in the minority of people who see summer coming to a close, but I'll take this weather over just about everything.
Yep. Nice, crisp mornings, and then today I think it's going to rise to about 76. Low humidity. Next few days actually look good, although I think there may be a chance of a shower or thunderstorm for Porch Fest on the west side on Sunday afternoon. I suppose you'll partake in some of that annual event?
That's right, Bob. I'm a West Sider. I live on Leroy Street, so Porch Fest activities are about a minute walk for me where we live. So I'll be out on Sunday checking out a lot of the different venues. I always think it's great, too, that you not only have the neighbors who are kind of hosting these individual bands or performers, but you have nonprofits like the Tri-Cities Opera and Binghamton Philharmonic and others that are showcasing their musicians and their talent right there on the west side. So I'll make my rounds. I'll usually do a few loops. Certainly love seeing the neighbors out. And it's been amazing this week on the west side. You see everyone mowing their lawns, getting their mulch ready, getting their flowers pruned, because it's kind of a showcase for the neighborhood. And I think, the west side neighborhood is one of the best neighborhoods that we have in the southern tier. And it's walkable. It's beautiful. The Abel Bennett Historic Track. And Porch Fest is now in its 10th year, believe it or not. We're really excited for it. And the organizers have done a lot of great work to make it really a seamless event.
Does the city have to do a lot to coordinate things for the event on Sunday?
We provide a lot of support as it relates to certainly public safety, working with the traffic division of the Binghamton Police Department, Department of Public Works, dropping off barricades. We assist on getting the message out about where parking is, where people can get a shuttle so they don't have to try to park inside kind of the footprint of Porch Fest. So that's a lot of where the city kind of falls in. But really, this is something that's been going on for so many years. They've really got it down to a science. People know what to expect. And, really, we just want residents to enjoy the day. It's a great Sunday on the west side of Binghamton.
Speaking with Binghamton Mayor Jared Cram, it's 10:14 on WNBF. About a week ago, you held a news conference to talk about some proposed changes with for one thing, reducing parking requirements around new housing projects. Basically, the point of the package of reforms that you're pushing for would be designed to encourage more housing throughout the city of Binghamton. And let's give a quick overview of the items that are being recommended and why you think these changes could be beneficial to have more housing developed in Binghamton in the years ahead.
Sure. So in Binghamton, throughout Broome County, and really if you look at any metropolitan area across the United States, there is a shortage of safe, quality, affordable housing. And what that does is for families living paycheck to paycheck, their rent burden, they're spending too much of their monthly income on rent, or they're choosing to live in homes or properties that may be something that they can afford, but is not safe, it's not kept up, and it's not good for their families. And so we have to make housing a top priority. We have to build new units of housing. we've been very aggressive going after our share in Binghamton of state subsidies and low-income housing tax credits and other incentives that will help build more housing. But we have to make sure that at City Hall, we're cutting all of the red tape, we're reducing the regulations, and, some of the key initiatives that I announced last week were eliminating certain regulations and requirements that could be barriers for new development, or could increase the cost or increase the timelines on what it takes to develop something. Sometimes the best way that government can help is actually to get out of the way and let the private sector or developers do their thing. So what we're doing is we're proposing to eliminate all parking requirements for affordable and senior housing. These are the housing developments that it may be very likely that the tenants in those buildings don't own a car, they're using public transport, and so they don't need actually that parking. The other thing it does is it reduces development costs. If you have a site where you have to put in a certain number of parking spots, making parking lots with pavement and drainage and landscaping is quite expensive. We want more of that land to be used for development, for the creation of new units. We're also allowing the Planning Commission to waive up to 75% of parking requirements for any type of development. That will make it easier for businesses, services, developments of all kind to lower their development costs and, just make it easier for them to get the approvals they need and get shovels in the ground. Then we're doing some other things to try to modernize the city of Binghamton zoning regulations as it relates to townhouses and condos. These are very popular housing types for young professionals, all the way up to empty nesters. And our current zoning codes on townhouses are just outdated. We want to be able to add those more in, especially to vacant lots that are in the city of Binghamton. And lastly, what we're doing is we're modernizing other regulations as it relates to lot sizes, lot coverage, and setbacks. Because if you went out today to try to build a single-family home on a normal-sized city buildable lot, you'd likely not be able to build a house that really anyone would like to live in. It would be way too small. It would have to deal with setback requirements that are just really outdated. So it's about building density in our commercial areas, getting more development happening there, but also protecting the integrity of single-family neighborhoods as part of this as well.
There's a project, and it's been presented to the Planning Commission. It involves actually one of the former Anzarute properties over on Clinton Street. First Ward Action Council is proposing something similar to a building they did several years ago on Clinton Street at 168 Clinton. Some commercial spaces, a couple of commercial spaces on the ground floor, and then apartments on the second and third floors. One thing that was pointed out by at least a couple Planning Commission members, the building that they're talking about at the corner of Clinton and Murray Streets is going on a lot that's relatively small, and they were concerned, is it too much building for that space? I mean, clearly the housing is needed. This would be, I think, geared for lower income people, and I mean, because it also would be supported through state funds or tax credits. But is that kind of a development something that in theory benefits from having reduced parking requirements that you're proposing as part of the package of changes? Yeah,
that would be one type of project. And if you think about where that site is on Clinton Street, it's on a commercial corridor. It's on the main drag of Clinton Street. And when you have those commercial type of areas, you want development that's really close to the sidewalk, so it's walkable, that people can access services right from the sidewalk. And you don't want to have a surface level parking as a key or major part of developments. And if you do have it, you want it kind of in the rear where it's out of the way, and you don't have to make people walk across a huge asphalt parking lot to visit a business or get services. So, that project is a really good story. It was vacant lots that were owned by Mr. Anzarute, and, as has been reported by you many times, the city won a major legal victory in prohibiting Mr. Anzarute from owning property in the city of Binghamton. And we also took a good chunk of his portfolio And these vacant lots were a couple of those properties that we took. So now we're partnering with a local developer, the First Ward Action Council, to build much-needed housing. Certainly the development is going to be contingent on some state grant dollars and other tax credits, but it's exactly the type of development that we want to see. It's going to be a mix of incomes. It includes commercial space, and it has to do with the revitalization of Clinton Street, which is something that I've talked about a lot as mayor. I think that it is a underinvested in and an area that's really ripe for opportunity, and has the history from a regional standpoint of being a major attraction. I think actually we were just talking about how it used to be with Philly Sales and the Clinton Street Run and all of the commercial properties there used to be a major destination for people coming into the city of Binghamton from far outside our borders. And that's something that I want to return to Clinton Street.
Another high-profile Anzarute property that is now empty because of a fire is over on Henry Street across from the post office, or near the post office. There were a couple of arson fires that happened within a matter of several weeks. I believe one was last winter, and then a couple months later there was another one. So now we've got, I think, a total of 3 vacant lots in the general area of the post office in what is now the emerging stadium district. Are there plans that are being considered, to your knowledge, about potentially finding housing or other projects that would be suitable for that site that's now open on Henry Street near Morabito Stadium?
Long term, there's certainly an opportunity there for infill development. I think if you look at the property ownership right now, kind of the property that's closest to Amici Restaurant is owned by a bank. That was one of the ones that burned down. The lot kind of next to that is part of the former Anzarute portfolio that the city owns. And then there's a couple other buildings that are one still owned by, I think, either a bank or some derivative of the Anzarute portfolio. One property that's owned by the developer that's working on the former Dixie Hotel. And then there's a final property which the city does own now and will be advancing a demolition for likely later this year. So once there are, an additional demolition and probably all of those properties hopefully under one ownership, I could absolutely see a development happening there. It's in the heart of downtown. It's a very deep lot. So you could have a commercial building there, really with no problem. We just have a little bit more work to do to make it so we don't have, 3 or 4 different owners of all of those properties.
What's the property number where another demolition is likely on Henry Street? Do you recall?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but it's the property that has some red paint on it, and there seems to be what looks like, a vacant storefront basically in the front of it. That is currently owned by the city. And so just to talk a little bit about that process for how we do demolitions, we have to follow state laws as it relates to asbestos abatement. We have to do surveys of those properties, get them out to bid. So that's a process that sometimes takes several months, but it's already underway, and likely later this year that property will be coming down.
I think that's the place where Mr. Typewriter used to be. I just punched up because I think after the February fire, I took a picture, and I'm looking at on Twitter. You can see the faded sign on the side because it was a storefront, and that's when Mr. Typewriter existed. I don't know how. Probably went out of business a couple of years before you were born when Mr. Typewriter was all the rage. But, it looked, the last time I took a close look at that building, it certainly was in pretty bad shape, and I think it was filled with a lot of, hate to say a lot of junk. It looks like a potential hazard. So you're saying at some point that's probably going to come down?
That's correct. And if you look at, the stadium district kind of at large, there's a lot of different things happening. Several years ago, there was demolitions that took place on the corner of Chapman and Henry, those blighted buildings that are now owned by the city. In the place, we have the proposal of the Stadium Lost Project, which will be an affordable housing project from Kearney Development Group, who is going after low-income housing tax credits this round, and the city's very supportive of that. We've got, finishing up the clearance of blight basically across the street from the post office, and anyone who's gone to the post office on Henry Street knows exactly the properties we're talking about. And we also have the plans that are in design right now for a reconstruction of Henry Street to address, some really important stormwater issues there, but general streetscape and beautification of Henry Street. Between the traffic that some of the businesses in that area get, certainly the traffic of the post office, but most importantly, all of the thousands and thousands of people that visit Mirabito Stadium on an annual basis, we want to make sure that our stadium infrastructure and walkability is the best we can make it. And we have to make improvements for pedestrian access. The traffic flows between Fayette Street and Shenango Street certainly need some improvements. And so we have design engineers working on that right now, probably in a 2-year process to fully reconstruct Henry Street from the Brandywine Ave all the way up to Shenango Street.
You referenced the Dixie Hotel project. It seems that it's stalled. I don't see much activity. In fact, no real activity this summer there. The project was announced a couple of years ago to bring in, I believe, market rate housing at that site, which had been a problem site for many years. Do you know what the status of that is? Is it in danger at this point? Because there doesn't seem to be work taking place this summer.
I don't have any information on that really one way or the other. Just from observing kind of some of the activities, what I saw over the course of, the last 6-12 months or so is a lot of interior demolition, a lot of removal of debris. I haven't seen, the construction trucks or boom lifts or anything else you'd see in a typical construction site. But I haven't received any kind of new information on that, but something I can look into.
And you also referenced stadium lofts. It's been a couple of years since that was announced, but it sounds as though it's still on track, as often is the case with these projects, including projects, say, at, I believe, Front and Clinton, and then further down on Clinton Street, major projects. A key part of that ultimately involves New York State, and as I understand it, in so many cases, the projects can't go forward until they make it through the process. And a lot of times only maybe 1 or 2 Binghamton area projects might be approved during a certain round. But the stadium loss idea is still moving forward, the last unit?
That's correct. Still moving forward. There will be an application submitted before the deadline. And again, this is getting a little bit technical in the weeds, but essentially, if you think about the construction of affordable housing units that are going to serve families that are maybe living paycheck to paycheck, families that are in poverty, you could never afford to build these quality new apartment buildings if you have to charge the rents that would be affordable for families. And so developers look towards tax credit projects where they can generate new revenue to help pay for some of the costs, or other subsidies from New York State. That's really the only way that you can build new affordable housing. It doesn't pencil out if you don't have those subsidies. And because of that, there is a huge backlog at the state level and a high competitiveness, even just in the Binghamton market for the projects that we have, for really good projects that could change neighborhoods and get more units of affordable housing. Only maybe 1 a year will be approved that will be under construction in the city of Binghamton. And, that process kind of has to speed up. But a lot of times, and really all times, we're beholden to the state on their allocation of those tax credits. And, I've been doing more, I think, than just about anybody to try to get these projects to the state's attention, utilize local funding to help cover funding gaps, show the state that we're serious. As I've mentioned before, Binghamton was the first municipality in the state to be designated as a pro-housing community by the governor. We are pro-development. We're pro-housing. We just need the state to catch up, really, with our aggressive timelines.
Speaking of unusual housing projects, and I talked with you about this last week after the news conference at the former Philadelphia Sales parking lot, as it turns out, on Dickinson Street. This idea for micro apartments over on Charlotte Street. Charlie Ackerman presented his thoughts to, I believe, the planning committee at City Council. very, very small apartments, 36 units. I believe he said 100 square feet in size, so I don't know. That's about the size of this studio. Not good at math. But the bottom line is he wants to acquire 4 city-owned parcels over on Charlotte Street. And I know last week when I brought this up after the news conference, you mentioned that you, as far as you know, the city had not officially been approached by Mr. Ackerman to acquire those properties.
Yeah, that's changed. So there has been an offer to purchase submitted with all offers to purchase of city property. We have it go through official channels of the assessment office, planning, as well as code. Certainly, these are kind of surplus lots. The city does not have a use for them, and I'd like to see them in private hands, back on the tax rolls, et cetera. My latest information was that, the plans that were presented may not be in line with New York State Code as it relates to efficiency apartments. And so there may be additional requirements or New York State Building Code that would apply to a project like this. And so our code office is, forwarded some information to the developer to see if, it's something that he still wants to take on if the plans kind of have to change.
Do you know offhand what the smallest legal apartment would be in Binghamton? How many square feet?
I'm not sure. I believe it's less than 200. I don't know if it actually exists, but I think New York State Code actually addresses efficiency type apartments. And I believe it's less than 200 square feet. Don't quote me on that, but there is a New York State Code actually that speaks specifically to these high efficiency apartments. Certainly I've seen, whether it's on social media or online, in New York City or even cities in Asia that have these sort of hyper efficient type of apartments in Hong Kong or Manhattan. And it's interesting. I don't know if I'd like to live that way, but when you have real estate that's in that high demand, people have to sometimes live in small apartments.
It's 10:31 at WNBF. Of course, there is a tiny home project that Broome County is leading over on the north side as part of the Veteran Services Center that's being developed where the bowling alley used to be, not far from the Binghamton Plaza. But that's a different type of thing. I mean, the 10 units that will be allocated for veterans, I don't recall what the square footage is, but they're not teeny tiny apartments. I mean, they're tiny homes, but they're bigger than what was being proposed or what's been talked about on Charlotte Street. Have you been looped in very much with what is a county-led project over there on the north side, which they're making good progress on? I mean, I've been over there a couple of times over the last several weeks, and they're moving forward with that project.
Yeah, when I last drove by just a few days ago, it looks like the roof infrastructure is kind of in place. Obviously a county-led project, a great project for the north side of the city of Binghamton. I remember when that was the state bowling alley. I think I had a second grade birthday there, if I'm remembering correctly. But certainly an area that, deserves investment. I think having that one-stop shop for veterans is great. Having it in that neighborhood is great. And I know that it received, some grant dollars from the federal government. I think the county has really stepped up in a big way, and it's further investments in the north side, and that's, definitely an important piece.
10:33 at WNBF. It's Friday morning. This is Bob Joseph. We're talking with Mayor Jared Cram. More coming right up at 92.1 FM, 1290 AM, streaming at WNBF.com. Continuing our conversation about Binghamton issues, there's no more Binghamton issue than the Binghamton Plaza. What's the latest on the legal situation between the city and the New Jersey owners of the former really big and popular retail space? There's still businesses there, and dozens of people work in those related businesses, but it's not like it was 30 or 40 years ago. What's going on with the city's eminent domain proceeding?
Yeah, and so just a kind of a brief history, there were two really major court wins that my administration got as it relates to the Binghamton Plaza. The first was, removing this bankruptcy protection that the plaza had, which resulted in them, having to pay, I think, over $500,000 in back taxes to the school district, city, and county, which also allowed an eminent domain proceeding to happen. We won our case with the 3rd Department Appellate Division. The plaza owners did not appeal that decision. The time has run out for them to appeal. And so right now, we have going through the process of an appraiser, looking at the conditions of the plaza, going through some financial information, to develop basically a valuation of what that plaza would be. As I've stated on your program and many times, that property has been a blight in the city of Binghamton for decades. It is defined in a negative way, an entire neighborhood. It is prime for redevelopment. It's close to the river. There's a beautiful, view of the Shenango River. It's at the intersection of several major interstates, and really, represents a great new opportunity for the north side. And even just removing that blighted plaza, the crumbling and heaving parking lot that's there, will be a sign that the city is investing in the north side, that we're not going to let problems that have existed for decades and decades to allow them to continue. And, the Binghamton Plaza was one of those. We took the fight to court, and we won. And we're now going through the continued legal process of that. As I said before, just because we won the case does not mean that the city's getting the keys tomorrow and businesses have to leave or there'll be a demolition crew before the end of the year. This is a very lengthy process. Our Office of Economic Development is happy to work with, the few remaining businesses that are there to try to find them new sites. But it's going to continue to be months before there's any type of, major activity over there. And but at the end of the day, the city was successful in this project, and we'll be getting, title to the property likely sometime in the next year or so. I would say less than a year. And, my goal would be to have demolition at least start before the end of the year next year.
Nearby, across the street, Town and Country Apartments. And this has been another one of those long-running sagas. People have been hoping, at least the people who live there have been hoping for major improvements and renovations in a place that's in really bad shape. There have been heating problems over the years. Parts of the roof have been collapsing. I understand vacancy now is fairly high at that site, correct?
That's correct.
So I guess the simple question is, when are finally some major repairs and renovations going to get started over at that big apartment complex? There are more than 200 units there. Yeah,
you mentioned the vacancy rate. So this is a property that certainly has a troubled history as it relates to code violations, kind of constant police activity at that site. While, recently it's been a little bit less. But this is another project that has been, going through the state process to receive these tax credits to allow for construction to happen. This is something that's going to be a, $50 million project. And, to totally renovate all of those units. And we talk about the housing shortages that we have in Binghamton. You mentioned the occupancy rates right now. Right now there are, I think, well over 100 units as part of Town and Country that are vacant. And think about...
Is that because they're really, by the standards of the average person, are uninhabitable? Because a lot of people that several people that I've spoken with about conditions at the complex say conditions are deplorable, and if they can get out, they will get out.
I would say that it more has to do with the fact that there has been this rehab project plan now going on several years. I'm very hopeful that in the short term, before the end of the year, we will have official word from the New York State Division of Homes and Community Renewal that the tax credits have been solidified and that the contractors can get in there. But without that state approval, nothing is going to happen. And so I would say on at least a monthly basis, if not more frequently, I've been advocating to the state, the highest levels of housing policymakers at the state level, working with our local officials as well, to say that this is our number one priority. This is ahead of all of the other housing projects that have been announced or I've talked about because of the needs of the families that live there, but also the availability. If we could rehabilitate those vacant units and get families to move in there, that would be the same as constructing a new 100+ unit apartment complex. Because right now they're vacant. They've been vacant for many years.
Is ARPA money still going to be used? The
Yes.
money that was allocated, will it be? Will the city miss out on the deadline for using that money?
Nope. We will still have our commitment of ARPA dollars towards the project, and we'll be working really hand in glove with the state to make sure that gets exactly where it needs to be to support the project.
And how much ARPA money?
$3 million.
$3 million. Continue our conversation with Binghamton Mayor Cram on News Radio, WNBF, on this Friday morning. Stay tuned. A few months ago to see the old CVS building at 68 Main Street that had been empty for several years. I was pleased to see the Dollar General store open up there. They did some renovations, and then they opened up, I think, in April. Then suddenly, a couple weeks after opening, there was what I consider to be a modest little quick rainstorm one afternoon, and then the place started flooding. All this water was pouring in, so that was the start of their problems. They reopened for a time after they cleaned up the mess, because I believe about half of the sales floor was inundated by the rain from that rainstorm that happened in April. And finally, the city took a closer look at the conditions at 68 Main Street, ultimately cited that property for 7 violations. So now the store is just standing there dark. It's empty. I think it's been about 4 weeks since the city ordered the building shut down because of the code violations. What's your sense of that whole saga? I mean, the building was sold, I think, for $800,000, and there was at least some new hope that the people in that neighborhood would have a store they could rely on. Well, it hasn't worked out very well so far.
Yeah, my understanding, and I've actually just, driving by, have seen construction trucks and different folks. There looks like there was some roof work being done within the last 10 days or so on the property. So it's getting those fixes in. Oftentimes code has a difficult job to do, which is to protect the folks who work in these buildings or are going to shop in these buildings, to make sure that they're safe. And, sometimes through no fault of the property owners or the companies that are doing the buildings become unsafe or do not become up to code. So they have to follow, state law. These are not laws that are set at the local level. It's not something that I have control over. But my understanding is that, work is happening and that, hopefully that store reopens. I know you also covered not exactly the same type of thing, but a similar thing on Conklin Avenue with a new store that was opening there. They had some issues with electrical service that was maybe done incorrectly, some fire suppression issues, but ultimately they rectified those, and the store is open. I haven't had a chance to stop by, but I did meet and talk to the building owner, the business owner, and let them know, anything we can do to support the business getting open, we would do.
Yeah, and at some point we're going to do a special feature about, say, for people opening businesses or starting something new, whether it's in Binghamton or some of the municipalities in Broome County. There are some specific requirements you need to meet. It's not true in all of Broome County, but some of those, if people don't do their homework, they're going to wind up, in some cases, unfortunately, that's what happened over with the Stop and Shop on Conklin Avenue. He discovered, albeit a little late in the game, shortly a few days after he opened, that he had not received the certificate of occupancy, I believe, from the city, and that there were some electrical issues that really needed to be addressed before the place could finally open.
Yeah, and that's something where, again, while it was certainly not something that anyone wanted to see, where a business is about to open, has to take a few days or a week to get the work in order. Another story that could be is a business that just opened, if there's faulty electrical work or there's not a fire suppression system that's required, and there's an emergency that happens to put first responders at risk or potentially dangerous type of construction work, we don't want that to happen either. So it is a balancing act, and one that we got to make sure that things are safe.
Regarding the Dollar General store, there is some news that I've learned. According to someone familiar with the property, which, by the way, is up for sale again, so if you know somebody wants to buy the property, it's available at a modest increase for what they paid earlier this year. Isn't about double what they paid initially, but the roofing work should get started next week. In fact, there are some dumpsters, big dumpsters out on the side, so probably some of the old roofing will be removed very soon, and a new roof will be put on in the next month or so. So the expectation is that the Dollar General store could be open in the next several weeks. But indeed, that roof needs to be fixed, and a couple of the other code issues. Apparently there was a big hole where water was getting into the basement. There were a total of 7 violations that were cited. There also was a hearing before the city put up the condemnation notice. There is a process that the city follows before taking the extreme action of having to shut down a building.
That's correct, and I think whether it's condemnation notices for properties, or when we talk about something like the lockdown law and the city's ability to go in and shut down these properties and force people to vacate if it's residential, or shut down a business if it's commercial, everyone always has due process. And there are times where I think the subject of a condemnation or the subject of a lockdown feels like the city is acting too powerfully, too overbearing, too quickly. And then there are times where the residents who have to live next door to a problem property feel like the city's not working quickly enough. And we have laws that guide the timeline on these things. We have to make sure that due process is followed, that the rights of everyone involved are secured. And, that is a process. But as long as we follow the process, we can ultimately get results. And that's a conversation I've had with many neighbors that are neighborhoods that have had a problem property as it relates to the lockdown law. It takes time, but it's a very powerful tool. We have to make sure the process is followed legally.
It's 1050 at WNBF. There's a building a few blocks to the east of here on Court Street at 188 Court Street. The owners, it's a white house. It's next to, I believe, St. Mary's Church. It's between St. Mary's Church and a building owned by the Akels, which incidentally was the location of the first ever Giant Market. I believe they opened in late 1932. And Akels still own that building. I believe it's being used now by Guthrie for mental health services. But in between that building and the church, there's this 2.5-story white house that the Akels, who now own the property, they bought that house last December. They want to tear it down, and there's been some controversy. They haven't received immediate approval from the city to be able to tear that building down and use that space for a parking lot. What are your thoughts on that property? Some people who've been inside the house, or at least seen pictures, say the house looks like it's in fairly good shape, and according to some people, wouldn't take a lot to fix up the house, and they view it as somewhat historic because it's sort of the last of its kind in that part of downtown Binghamton.
Yeah, and I want to be a little bit limited in commentary on that because there are pending kind of cases before both the Planning Commission and the Commission on Architecture and Urban Design. But essentially, kind of the latest on that is that Commission on Architecture and Urban Design referred it to the Planning Commission to see if the future use, which is a parking lot extension, if that land use and development, if it could work basically and can meet all of the stormwater requirements and design guidelines. And so I believe CAUD kind of kicked it to the Planning Commission, and Planning Commission will be weighing whether or not it's something that can really legally be done or responsibly be done. If the Planning Commission finds a way to make it work, my understanding is that that would be allowed to be demolished, and you could see a parking lot there. But whether it relates to local ordinances or really the State Historic Preservation Office, tearing down buildings, historic or otherwise, to build surface-level parking lots are generally not something that the State Historic Preservation Office really wants cities to advance, and particularly if there are historic aspects of a property, they don't want to see that happen. But in this case on Court Street, it's really in the Planning Commission's hands, and they will decide really what happens with the property.
And there could be a decision sometime in September, the way things are going, as we understand it. It's 10:53 at WNBF. Parking garages. Well, the city is continuing to see construction of the new Water Street garage near Boscov's. But in the meantime, the large garage and the old garage that still is in service on State Street, there are areas of that garage that, to be honest, they don't look good. If you take a look and you see concrete that has fallen and parts of metal exposed that you really wouldn't think should be exposed in a parking structure that people are using 24/7, how closely is the city monitoring the Water Street parking garage?
Extremely closely, and we've done work, over the months to make sure that any loose concrete is safely removed, making sure that we don't have any structural concerns as it relates to that garage, which we do not at this point. But as you mentioned, the State Street garage is in the same condition today that the Water Street garage and the Collier Street garage were before they were demolished. And so the State Street garage is certainly not long for this world. It's not a parking garage that's going to serve the city for another decade to come. And so once the Water Street garage is completed and we have that in full operation, one of the things I want to do is conduct an update to the downtown parking study that we did about 10 years ago to understand, parking demands downtown. The sheer cost of the construction of parking garages in 2024, 2025 at $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 per spot, is so extreme and has gotten so expensive that I think that there's a conversation to have whether the city can alone fund another parking garage project in downtown. Certainly that's used by, more than just downtown merchants. It serves, major employers. It serves the bus station. But, we need parking downtown. Having a parking demand is a symptom of a growing and vibrant city. If there were all kinds of parking availability downtown, it would mean there's not much happening. But thankfully, we've got great independent restaurants. We have events that draw people downtown, and we have a parking shortage. But long term, to spend tens of millions of dollars on yet another brand new parking garage that's wholly paid for by the city is, I think, a very tough argument to make.
Is there going to be a need to do some additional repairs this year at State Street as far as adding more concrete and trying to address some of the areas that appear to be most problematic?
I would say that, nothing that is, I would consider a major repair or anything, but there's constantly maintenance that's being done on garages. Even, the new garage at 7 Hawley Street, there's, annual maintenance that's done. Nothing that people would necessarily notice, but obviously we try to keep it up the best we can and really looking at the cost benefit of that.
In the final months and years of the Collier Street garage and even over at Water Street, there were times where certain sections were closed because of safety concerns. Do you anticipate that might have to happen at some parts of the State Street garage as we look ahead for the next couple of years while things are being assessed and how the city moves forward dealing with the parking challenges?
I think it's difficult to say, looking a couple years in the future. I think some of the closures that happened at Collier Street were, sometimes half the garage was closed down because of concern. So it's nothing to that level. But this is infrastructure that was built, 4 or 5 decades ago, that is an old style design. It is very old. It's been crumbling for a long period of time. And you're going to have maintenance, and certainly when we want to keep safety as a main focus. But it's servicing what it needs to do right now. And once the Water Street garage is in operation, we can really take a look at how parking demand is shifting as we have 500 new spots. We'll have to make some tough decisions as it relates to State Street. That's also a very, I think, strategic site in the heart of downtown Binghamton. It's a very large site in downtown Binghamton, and we have to look at what our options would be as a city-owned parcel.
When will the first portion of the Water Street garage be ready to open?
We're still on track for before Thanksgiving, and as the weather has been cooperating well, our general contractors are there. Folks that are driving by can see a lot of different activity, but there's been no change in the schedule as of today.
To be continued. We'll have you back in the studio in a few weeks to update people on what's going on in Binghamton.
Thank you, Bob. We'll see everyone at Porch Fest on Sunday.
Binghamton Mayor Jared Cram live on our program on this Friday morning right here at News Radio WNBF. Coming up, we'll have an opportunity for you to call in and talk about the issues at 92.1 FM, 1290 AM, WNBF.com. 607-772-1290. That's the number for the issue hotline. If you'd like to talk about the issues, go ahead. Make that call. They could be local issues or national issues. Feel free to give us a call. As we continue on the Friday broadcast, it was truly a TV show, as they would say in the news, a TV show for the history books. Wow. Wow, indeed. Nobody will ever forget the show of shows, as seen on many of the world's most popular news channels. Of course, I have to acknowledge I haven't seen it. Well, I've seen bits and pieces. They put it on too late for a guy who has to be here early for the early news here at First News Binghamton. So I didn't actually see it, but man, I've heard a lot about it, and everybody seems pretty happy with how the 4-part miniseries that originated in Chicago. Everybody apparently was pretty happy, I guess, happy with how it went. Here's part from our big stack of stuff. This is Kamala Harris, the Democratic candidate for President of the United States of America.
Let us write the next great chapter in the most extraordinary story ever told.
All right. The next great chapter in the most extraordinary story ever told. 607-772-1290. Good morning, WNBF. You're on the air. What's your first name? And where are you calling from? Oh, hold on. Water in the lines. Good morning. You're on the air. What's your first name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, good morning, Bob. It's DJ in Binghamton.
Yeah, what's up?
Well, I'm calling to say that I'm very happy to hear about the progress that is happening in Binghamton, New York. I listened to the mayor for the whole time he was on, and it looks like we're coming along just fine. One suggestion I do have, though, to the city of Binghamton, to the mayor, whoever can do it. You know, I look at other cities, places on the television, and I see that they have boats and docks on the river, jet skis and boats and everything, and we have nothing. And my question is that because of the dam that goes over? Do people not want to, at the Confluence Park, which is going to be a festival there tomorrow, I believe, that dam, I don't know if that's the culprit. And my idea is for the city, they used to put sand down on Sandy Beach on Conklin Avenue. That's just, now it's all rocks and whatever. It's people, you know. So I think that people would like to see that done again. Sand on Sandy Beach and down where, you know where, across from the American Civic Center, all those trees and weeds and brush, that could be taken out. And by the Martin Luther King statue on the other side, there could be sand and places and a dock for boats. I saw one the other day, Bob. It was nothing but John boats. People had brought their John boats, and they were on the river, and they were just fishing and having a great time. A riverfront like Peoria has, where I lived for 10 years when I pastored my second church, I was in Peoria. They had all that, not just a river walk where you walk, you know, down along the old Chase Bank. What is that now? The thing with the bowl, Merrill or something. You know, you walk down, and it's nothing. You just walk, and it's nothing. But if we were able to utilize the river and have boats, jet skis,
I like it. I like it. Make our rivers great again.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Make our rivers great again. I'm gonna get a guy to make me some hats. I'm gonna get 1,000 hats. They're gonna be green and white. Make our rivers great again.
Right, Murga.
Okay, I like the ideas. Thank you. I hope you have a great weekend.
Yes,
thanks.
You too.
11:15 WNBF, the Idea Station. Good morning. You're on the air. What's your first name? Where are you calling from?
Gary from the West Side. Bob, I haven't watched the either convention. I just see the highlights. And I saw this thing about Gus Walz, right? So the governor's son. And, he came on and he was just so happy to see his dad up there, and he's pointing up at him and he's going, there's my dad, and he's crying. And I'm like, boy, what a touching moment. It really was. Of course, until the Republican side has to bully that person. It's like Ann Coulter. This is what she said. Talk about weird. And she deleted that. Another guy, stupid crying son. You raised your kid to be a puffy beta male. Congratulations. Right? And then it's sickening how it just seems to always come from the Republican side, too.
So my question is, and not to put too fine a point on it, what's wrong with Ann Coulter anyway?
I don't know what's wrong with her. I mean, that was
come on. Doesn't she know better? I mean, she knows. She's old enough to know better.
Well,
right?
You know what it was? I think this is, all right, so in her defense, this is what I'm going to say, Bob, is that I think that she didn't know that he had a learning disability or whatever it is. And so she just said, oh, look at this guy, that's what happens. It's just, I can't, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know. And, you didn't see, like, Barron wasn't even at the convention for his dad when he was nominated. I mean, it was just a touching moment that it just seems like a moment like that. How do you find negativity towards it? But
because it's Ann Coulter.
And many others.
I thought that she would exercise some restraint. Why not?
You would hope so.
Why not exercise some restraint? Can't she find something, I don't know, more appropriate, something issue-related to criticize the Democrats on? Lord knows there are a lot of issues that Ann Coulter must disagree with the team of Walz-Harris. Talk about the issues. Why would you talk about his son? What did Gus ever do to Ann Coulter?
Because maybe the ex-president is a person who, that's the way he runs his show.
But that's different. That's okay for Trump to be Trump. We already have factored that in. We know.
But then other people take over that.
No, you don't. I know, but they shouldn't. Let Trump be Trump. But nobody should emulate him. Nobody. And I don't care if you're an 8-year-old girl or an 88-year-old guy. Nobody wants to behave that way. But that's the way he is, and I accept it. At first, I was disappointed. Now I've just come to the point of acceptance. I don't condone it, but I also understand. At this stage of his life, he to be honest with you, Gary, he can't change. He just can't change who he is. So I accept. I accept him. I accept him for who he is, and I accept his limitations. And I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm saying he's a good guy who has some limitations, and for whom the normal rules of social interaction apparently don't apply. But he's 1 out of 300 million. The rest of us know how to behave.
That's right.
And again, I'm not being critical. I finally have come to a breakthrough of appreciating Donald Trump for who he is.
Bob, when I was a young boy, I was taught in Catholic school that nobody is right 100% of the time. And if they tell you that they are, don't believe them and steer away from them. And Donald Trump is someone who is right 100% of the time. 100% of the time. I didn't lose the election. I didn't do this. I don't know, Bob, if you've typed in, why don't you try this right now? Type in a Google search of Donald Trump saying he's sorry. And does anything ever come up?
I'm not going to type it in because it'll break Google. Google only has limited computing capacity, and that's like here's the only analogy I can think of. It's like in a calculator, if you try to divide anything by 0, it's not going to work. I don't care if it's 1 divided by 0 or 1 trillion divided by 0. It just isn't going to work. The same is if I put in those search terms, Trump apology, it'll break Google. I don't want to be to blame.
I know. I don't think you could find anything.
Of course you can't. You know, and that's okay. Hey, I'm good with that. And no, I'm great. I'm at peace. I'm at peace with who he is, what he is, and I will tell you, Gary, and all the other viewers today, he is not going to change.
Yeah, okay, so we're accepted with that.
Yeah, and that's fine. In fact, I'll tell you this. I'll go one step further, Gary. If something happens to Donald Trump between now and November 5th where it appears that he's changed, that only means one thing.
What's that?
AI has taken over. Because that's, if they start posting things on Twitter and elsewhere on social media, or even on would appear to be live TV interviews, and it appears that Trump has appreciably changed his attitude, that only means that AI is better than we thought.
You know, if Kamala Harris wins the election, people will look back upon Donald Trump and Joe Biden when they were going at it with each other, and maybe the debate was the turning point in everything, because if there was no debate, we'd still have Joe Biden. Let's face it.
The debate, whether Americans know it or not, but historians will conclude that June debate on CNN was a miracle. It was a miracle. It saved America from a lot of grief. That's America, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Americans of all ages were saved, shockingly, thanks to a televised debate in late June. And fortunately, it happened. If it didn't happen, I don't know where we would be. But this country would be in a serious, serious predicament. So,
with two old people.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is that I congratulate Donald Trump and Joe Biden for agreeing to that late June debate on CNN, because at that moment, I would say within 10 seconds that Joe Biden started to speak, that's when suddenly it emerged that America needs another choice. So thank you to Donald Trump. Thank you to Joe Biden. Thank you to Jill Biden for allowing her husband to participate, not making up some excuse that he's got a cold or tested positive for COVID. Thank you to all, including the fine folks at CNN, for making that June debate possible, because that marked a turning point. I would say the historians will go back, maybe not next year or even in 5 years, but 10 or 20 years, they'll go back and say at that point, at 9:03:30 on that night, that Thursday night on cable TV, that's when America made a breakthrough.
It did.
We did. And thank you. I've never been more ebullient in expressing my thanks to Donald Trump and Joe Biden and everybody, all their enablers, everybody who got them to the studio on time. Thank you so much.
And we did so with that. We got a younger candidate, which America wanted. And, everything showed that America wanted somebody young in there. And I'm not saying she's the answer. Believe me, Bob. I mean, if you would have said 2 months ago that Kamala Harris would be running for president, I think that we all would have been scratching our head a little bit there, because I don't think really anybody liked her that much, and I disliked her. She was just...
She was tolerated. Democrats tolerated her. Republicans didn't like her. The Republicans generally, I believe, despised her. But even Democrats, even those who one would think would be moderately supportive, I think for the most part, they simply tolerated her. And now Democrats and independents are looking upon Kamala Harris as the savior. Not just the savior of democracy and the savior of freedom, but possibly the savior of the American dream.
We'll see where it goes.
We'll see. Yeah, nothing's cast in stone. I mean, people still have to vote. It's 11:25. This is Bob Joseph, the Joyful Station, WNBF. Okay, let's go to the Joy lines. Matt from Binghamton. Matt who claims to be in Chicago. Good morning.
No, I'm on my way back now. I got my whole Prius full of balloons, though. And I got a few of them out of there. But anyway, it was an amazing spectacle. One of the most important things to, I think, know is that the party finally has taken back the flag, patriotism, freedom, and democracy, and made people realize that we really are the people that care about democracy. And the one thing that was really telling is when Al Sharpton spoke and brought out the Central Park exonerated five who spent many years in jail, ruining the young years of their lives. And, one of them is now a great success story. He's the New York City council person. But the interesting thing about that is still to this day, even with a confession and DA evidence to back up the confession, the guy who confirmed the DNA they found, Donald Trump still will not admit his mistake. And that tells it all. Even when there's absolute proof, I mean, he can say anything he wants and tell lies, which we all know he does. But when there's absolute scientific proof and a confession, and these five young men whose lives were destroyed when he put the ad in the paper calling for their execution, and he still won't admit his, his mistake. I just think that I hope people saw how strong of a leader Kamala Harris. I'll admit, you don't really get to know a lot of vice presidents that closely. You probably knew Joe Biden better than anybody because of his long career, but she is, you look at her background, you look at everything she's done, and people who saw, you know that, what's his name, Karl Rove, when she ran for Attorney General in California, he saw her promise, and he tried to destroy her career way back then. They spent millions of dollars to try to prevent her from being Attorney General of California because they saw what she was going to end up being. And, it's certainly a twist of fate to put her where she is now, but she patiently always doing the right thing, always sticking up for what she believes, and she got this opportunity, and boy, she's showing who she is, and I think people are going to say, wow, she is presidential. She showed strength. She showed how she'll deal with international problems. Yeah,
and she look in the last 30 days how much she's had to put up with. So appreciate your call.
Thank you. Bye.
11:30 WNBF. And let's see. Oh, is this John from the Binghamton Plaza?
Yes.
Good morning, John.
Good morning. I just recently heard, the mayor on there, part of it. What I got to say is nobody has reached out to any of our tenants. They all told me this. Nobody has reached out. They don't know what they're going to do, what's going on. Exactly not. Every time any question, our lawyer, even our Khaleesi wants to know, we got to go ask the lawyer. We have people that want to come in just for the winter to store this stuff. We can't make no commitments or not. But I think it's very wrong that they aren't over here trying to reach out to these tenants. I mean, there's 62 full-time employees here. I mean, they need to start reaching out and finding a place. Help them find a place with reasonable rent that they can afford with reasonable parking. But that's one thing I wanted to say. Also, there's a rumor going around here, I don't know how true it is, that the reason nothing's happening at Country Town Apartment is because Groom Community College wants to acquire the property to put student housing in there because there's so much controversy about putting student housing or dorms out back of their building to raise their school.
Well, the question I would have, though, is now if things were normal and sort of the way they were maybe before the pandemic, is there really any big demand for real additional student housing for SUNY Broome? Maybe there is. I'm not sure that there is, but I would be surprised. But who knows? I mean, interesting things have happened before, so it wouldn't necessarily shock me if that happened.
Right. It could be a rumor. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, sometimes there can be substance to rumors, but I'll have to see what I can find out. Otherwise, anything new recently with the Binghamton Plaza itself, as far as any additional businesses leaving or anybody coming in at least short term? What's the current situation?
We do have people that want to come in just short term, but they don't want to make commitments. We have people that want to, be displaced for the winter time for storage and stuff like that, but we can't make no commitments on that because we don't know what's going to happen. I know Galici's been in touch with the lawyers, and the lawyer said, "Oh, you got to go through your lawyer." I mean, we can't get no direct answers.
Well, keep me posted if anything else happens.
One quick thing with the appraisal: how do they know? How does the city know without going all this work, without knowing what they have to pay for this place? Just say what happens if it's $50 million, $100 million, or something like that. Is the city going to come up with that money? I mean, you just don't take.
Well, that's an interesting question. If the appraisal has yet to be conducted, so the city doesn't really know. Maybe the city has a guesstimate of what they would be expected to pay, but indeed, if an appraisal suggests that it's far more than what the city has been planning to pay, I guess my question is, after all this, then does the city then have the right to say, "Oh, okay, well that's too much, forget about it"?
They do.
They can. So after all this, indeed, and who knows? I have no idea what a fair, accurate appraisal of that property would be. But I think that's intriguing that after everything that's happened over the last few years, that the city potentially could just drop it.
Correct. It's 100% correct. 100% correct. I mean, we have lost different tenants that wanted to come in here because they want longer-term leases.
Yeah, but that suggests to me, and again, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not going to try to play one on the radio, but it suggests to me then if that were to happen, then the owners of the Binghamton Plaza might have a sufficient case to take the city to court to assert, well, we lost money, we lost tenants who were there, who left because of the uncertainty, and we also were unable to secure new tenants because nobody wanted to make a short-term commitment. Seems like if that does happen, the city would face the potential for litigation from the plaza owners.
Right. The thing about it, we had a couple of manufacturing facilities wanted to come in here and create jobs, but when we talked about this before. The city don't really want manufacturing jobs here, but it was already for the damn hemp to be here that we got stuck with. I mean, the city was out here making all these big speeches, all of them getting their pictures taken out here. It was the greatest thing in the world. Ben.
Well, back then, hemp was hot. Yeah. Now it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, suddenly nobody wants to touch hemp. Everybody wants, cannabis is king and get the hemp out of here.
Right. So. I mean, that's the thing about it. The building was perfectly all right for that. What happened in a couple of years after that? It's a lot of things going on.
All right. Well, keep me posted.
Keep you informed.
All right. If you see me around there, which you probably will, just wave and maybe I'll chat with you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. It's John at the Binghamton Plaza. He's the property manager, and we have talked to him over the years about the plaza, and I've actually toured much of the facility as we've covered this story, and we'll see what happens in the coming months with the future of that property on West State Street on Binghamton's north side. Let's take some more calls, shall we? Hi, you're on the air. What's your first name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, good morning there, Bob. It's Dave from Vestal. How's it going?
Oh, it's going well. I'm very joyful.
Good. Yeah, it sounds it the way you and Matt and others there were gushing it up over the over the Democratic convention. But come on, she's terrible. You guys know it, and you're all pretending she's not. It's Bob. These are the differences I observed from both parties' conventions. The Republicans embrace patriotism. Matt's wrong. They're the ones that embrace patriotism, even populism, capitalism, and they love voter ID laws. Democrats, they embrace, and I'll be nice and call it socialism, Bob. They're anti-Semites, anti-capitalists. They don't believe in voter ID laws. 4 years ago, they knew socialism could not win. That's why they sabotaged Bernie's campaign.
But here's the thing. Listen carefully to this from our specially selected stack of stuff. And I think this proves beyond a doubt that the former prosecutor truly is a patriot, that she stands for truth, justice, and the American way.
In the courtroom, I stood proudly before a judge, and I said 5 words: Kamala Harris for the people.
She's for the people.
Bob, here's my question to you. What has happened since 4 years ago, since then to this point, that they believe a socialist ticket can win now? What has happened where they believe it's possible for
It's not a
socialist
ticket. If it was a socialist ticket, we would have been watching the Socialist Convention. It was the Democratic National Convention. I heard it, even the Fox News Channel, not noted for veracity all the time. Even they called it like it was. I gave them a lot of credit. Must have been hard for Rupert Murdoch to suck it up.
In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that. But
no, I didn't make it up. That's not AI. It's serious, extremely serious. That was on Fox. It was on the Fox News Channel last night. It was on Newsmax. Look it up.
Yeah, I know, Bob. I know.
Hey, they couldn't put it on if it wasn't true.
That's a good one, Bob. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm just saying. And now, don't you worry about a thing. I hope you have a joyful weekend.
Yeah, you do the same, Bob.
All right. Thanks, Dave. That's the story from Vestal making contemporary news. Stay tuned. This is the station that truly is serving America. I'm the most patriotic person you'll ever hear on the radio. You might hear Bongino today claiming that even though he's a former Secret Service employee, he's patriotic. He can claim that. Hannity? Oh, I'm Mr. Patriotism. Look at me. I have a Fox show, too. Well, yeah, I'm sure you're patriotic. I'm sure they're not going to revoke your pass to the Fox News Channel studio. I'll hand you that. Levin? Yeah, he's patriotic. He knows a thing or two about the Constitution. But I will put my patriotism up against theirs any day. This is the USA, and this is NBF on a Friday morning. Stay tuned. It's a Friday morning, and as often happens, Friday surprises can occur on the radio. We're a very flexible operation, so some guy just wanders in off the street. Hi. A random guy. Why don't you move the microphone there a little closer? So have you ever been at this radio station before?
I haven't been here to see you, Bob. They told me when I walked in, they said they put you down here in the basement. So
it's for safety. That's the recommendation of Homeland Security. They say,
there you go.
Keep them in the basement surrounded by hundreds of tons of concrete, steel, and glass. And that way, if anything happens, we'll know where to find him.
No windows down here. I don't know. I might just move in.
Yeah, but I can punch up the spy cameras here. We do have spy cameras, so I can see. Wasn't looking, so I didn't see that we have a special guest.
Snuck in.
So if people haven't recognized the voice by now, sign in, please.
Yeah, this is Josh Riley, Democratic candidate for Congress in New York 19.
Well, welcome to WNBF. It's good to meet you after all these years. I was starting to wonder. I've seen you on TV, and listeners had reported that you're an actual person. And so, anyway.
Yeah, we've talked on the phone so many times. Usually in the mornings, I'm getting the kids ready. But we're in town this morning. Want to just pop in and say hey.
So let's talk about the campaign. Again, you're the Democrat running against Republican incumbent Mark Molinaro. How is the campaign going up to this point? I think it's only, 74 days?
73, 74. Who's counting? Yeah. No, the campaign's going great. I'm really excited about it. Spending ton of time traveling across this district, talking to voters. We have hundreds of volunteers who have already knocked on thousands of doors. And the thing I'm hearing over and over is just a real sense of frustration with the way our politics are working, the way the economy is working. It's all working really great for the political establishment. It's working really great for the special interests. It's not working well at all for folks across upstate New York. The cost of living is too high, and people are really struggling to get by, and they're looking for change.
Do you think people will be inclined to blame the Democrats, including a Democratic candidate for Congress, for the economic challenges people are facing? There's been an effort, of course, over the last few years to say, well, this highly unusual rate of inflation and things like gasoline prices that are a lot higher than anybody expected, that it's all the result of Joe Biden and Democrats and Democratic policy. Is there that sort of effort to blame you and blame all Democrats for all the economic problems that have happened over the last 2 or 3 years?
The voters that I talk to are not thinking about this in terms of political party. It's not necessarily blame the Democrats, blame the Republicans. A lot of it is blame all of the politicians. And I think that the high costs that we have seen over the last number of years are the result of really two things. The first is that we are seeing the consequences of decades of terrible policies out of Washington that shipped all of our jobs to China and to Mexico. So when you have something like a global pandemic and you don't make things in the United States anymore, that has consequences. We have to import things from all over the world. The supply chains get tangled up during the pandemic. And what happened, and we know that as well as anywhere in this community, politicians sold us out, shipped all of our jobs overseas just so that Wall Street can make a profit. Pandemic hits, prices go up. That's why a huge part of my agenda is making things in America again, making things in upstate New York again. So that's a piece of it. The other piece of it is that our political system is corrupt as hell. And you've got these big, powerful special interests with these massive slush funds that they're using to dole out corporate PAC checks and line the pockets of politicians like my opponent, who's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars in corporate PAC money. And then they turn around and price gouge people across upstate New York. The politicians do really well because they get more corporate PAC money. The big special interests do really well because they enjoy record profits, and folks around here struggle. I mean, you're on NYSEG. Everybody around here is on NYSEG. The utility monopoly just jacked up the rates by 60%, and the politicians are doing nothing about it because they're taking corporate PAC checks from them. So that's why I don't take any corporate PAC money. We got to fight the price gouging, and we got to get our politics to a place where it's working for folks.
What kind of a plan reasonably can be adopted in Washington that's going to effectively fight price gouging? Americans who are old enough might remember there was someone named President Richard Milhous Nixon who tried to put on price controls half a century ago, and that turned out to be a debacle. It sounded good on paper, and at first I'm sure a lot of consumers said, oh, okay, this'll help us cope with the inflationary spiral that we've seen. Well, in the end, it turned out to be a major mistake. And it seems to me that when it comes to government trying to control things like prices, it's going to be an exercise in futility.
Nixon was well before my time, but here's
well, it's too bad. It's I followed especially his travails in 1974, August of 74 were memorable, we'll just say, but you've probably seen the history books. But anyway,
so here's so the real part here. So a couple of things. Number one, we have cops on the beat that are supposed to break up these massive monopolies that are supposed to crack down on the corporate price gouging, right? Cops on the beat, whether it's the Justice Department, the Federal Trade Commission, and what Mark Molinaro did was voted to cut their budgets by at least 30%. There was a bill in Congress last year that would have had massive tax cuts for the wealthy, but then cut taxes or cut revenues for all of these other things we need, including the cops on the beat, to stop the price gouging. So that's one thing. But the other thing is all of this comes back to our political system is rotten to the core, and it's the corruption. And so the politicians who are in office and taking thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars from the corporate PACs have no incentive to crack down on the price gouging. In fact, the opposite. Their incentives are to help the price gouging because that's good for their political coffers. So for me, it all goes back to corruption and rooting it out of our politics.
All right. Well, we'll see how that goes. So, the convention just ended last night. Now, because of my schedule this week, they thoughtfully suggested that I fill in early in the morning for my colleague who's on vacation. So I haven't had a chance to see any of the convention live. Obviously, I've got a big stack of stuff from things that, say, Kamala Harris and some of the other speakers said during the week. What were some of the impressions? I don't know how much of the convention you actually viewed over the last few nights. What did you watch last night?
So can I tell you, I know this sounds incredibly lame, Bob. I haven't been able to watch any of it. They put everything, most of the speakers are on. So I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. We do dinner, bedtime, bath time. It's a routine. The 4-year-old loves reading books. The 1-year-old can't sit still. It's a routine. And then immediately after that is my bedtime. Especially with Mateo waking up at 5:30, 5:45 in the morning. So I also have missed the entire convention. I've been trying to catch up with it on the news. It sounds like you are.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I mean, I guess they'll have another convention in 4 years. I'll try to watch.
And hopefully the kids are old enough that they won't need as much attention.
By then, maybe they'll want to watch with you. Make enough popcorn.
That's the hope.
So as far as some of the other critical issues, I guess most people will say, what's another really big difference between you and Mark Molinaro? I mean, he's to a large extent with his interviews and also with the commercials that are running. He's trying to portray himself in many ways, I think, is like you, kind of from, working class, and you grew up in upstate New York, and that's all good. I grew up in upstate New York, and I had, tough times and wound up in radio. You see how things go. But what's the other, what would be one of the other biggest differences between you and the Republican incumbent?
Yeah, there's a handful of really big differences between the two of us. We've talked about one of them. He has taken hundreds of thousands of dollars in corporate PAC checks, and you can draw a line from the checks that he's cashing to the votes that he's taking in Congress, and then you can draw a line from those votes to the high prices that folks are paying here. We talked about the utility monopolies. My opponent has taken thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars from the big foreign corporation that owns NYSEG. And when NYSEG jacked up rates, my opponent, what did he do about it? He put his head in the sand. He didn't do anything. Whole bunch of examples. Gas prices, housing prices, all of it. I don't take any corporate PAC money. My vote's not for sale, and I'm going to go and fight like heck to lower prices. That's one thing. I'm running against someone who's a 30-year career politician. I'm pushing for term limits. I think we need new voices and we need new leadership. One of the most important differences, and voters talk to me about this just about every day, is that I'm pro-choice, and my opponent's not. He has a 30-year track record of opposing Roe v. Wade. Every opportunity he's had during his career, including recently in Congress, to vote against a woman's right to make her own health care decisions and get access to abortion services, he's consistently voted against it. When I get to Congress... But as
he's pointed out, his vote really has no impact on people in New York State. New York State rights to that have existed for decades are maintained.
Now that's absolutely wrong.
Well, he's responding to that effect in his latest commercial.
Well, he's wrong about that. He's completely wrong about that. The Trump proposal and a lot of Republicans in Congress have made no mistake about saying they want a national abortion ban. And if a national abortion ban comes onto the table in Washington, D.C., that could overwrite any protections that we have here in New York. At the same time, the converse is also true. We should have, like we did for 50 years, a federal right for women to have abortion access and make their own health care decisions. That was ripped away by the Supreme Court. And right now, Congress needs to pass the Women's Health Protection Act to put that federal right back into place. He refuses to do it. I'm going to go to Congress and get it done.
How important do you think it is now that the Democrats have a ticket that, say, 3 months ago nobody really could have imagined? I mean, things have moved quickly since that fateful debate in late June on CNN. Is it really dramatically going to, well, obviously the presidential race is totally affected because Democrats have a slate nobody would have foreseen. But as far as the potential impact, say, on congressional races and say here in this district in upstate New York.
This is a very, very competitive district. It's one of the most competitive in the country. Most of the folks I talk with across this district are less concerned with political party and more concerned with how people are approaching particular issues. I was down on Birchall Street, which is where I grew up, and I was talking to my neighbor from growing up, and he put it well. He said, Josh, around here we don't really think of ourselves as Democrats or Republicans. We're just kind of angry with all of them. And I think that's how a lot of voters feel across this district. For me, the change at the top of the ticket hasn't changed my race and my approach to this. I'm out talking to voters, and the first question I ask them is not who do you like in the presidential race. It's what is it that's keeping you up at night? What is it that you're talking with your family about at the kitchen table? And more often than not, I'm hearing from families like, for example, I was in Liberty down in Sullivan County for Cinco de Mayo, and I was talking to a young family, probably late 20s, early 30s. They had 2 little kids. And I don't ask them, what's your political party? How do you vote? Who are you voting for? I ask them, what is it that keeps you up at night? And they said, Josh, the utility prices go up. The gas prices go up. We're not sure we can afford the rent to keep a roof over the kids' heads. And so for me, those are the conversations I'm having no matter who's at the top of the ticket. And I also think it's important to know, no matter who wins this presidential race in November, whether it's Trump or Harris, if there's stuff that I agree with them on that I think is going to bring some jobs back home, is going to lower the cost of living for folks around here, is going to make sure a woman has the right to make her own health care decisions, is going to secure the border. If they're doing stuff that helps upstate New York, I don't care if it's Trump, I don't care if it's Harris, I'm going to work with them. And at the same time, if they're hurting upstate New Yorkers and doing things that I think are harmful, I'm going to fight them.
Are you optimistic about at least the way things are going in Broome County in terms of the economy?
Yeah, I really, really am. A big part of the reason why I'm running for Congress is because I am so hopeful about the promise and the potential of this region. I mean, we have had some really hard times over the last generation. I mean, my story is a typical Triple City story. It's a typical upstate New York story. Family that came here over 100 years ago, worked at EJ's, worked at IBM. I think before we got on the air, I was talking about the EJ houses. And we saw the place gutted when jobs got shipped overseas. But right now, we're on the verge of a renaissance, bringing back battery manufacturing, a whole bunch of really cool manufacturing opportunities happening around the community. And one of the things that...
Oh, by the way, we're out of time.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Time goes by, but you'll come back to the studio.
Yeah, well, let's talk about all the great opportunities there are to rebuild the
economy
next time.
Gotta run. Thanks for popping in.
Bob.
And that's all the time we have today, folks. Hope you have a good weekend.
Thanks,
WNBF Binghamton.